Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend the Momo Fanfics back with the amazing fanfiction. This is Series A, What If Deku Became a Villian? Beat it twerp, Katsuki shouted as he passed by Izuku Midoriya at the shul grounds. Or else I am going to beat your quirkless ass. Izuku stumbled back in fright and covered his face, expecting Katsuki to hit him. As seconds passed, nothing happened, and he slightly opened his eyes to reveal that he was the only one left beside the gate. Great, right in the morning I have to deal with this, Izuku muttered. He grabbed his bag around tighter and glanced at the sky with hopelessness. Izuku looked down and saw Katsuki and his group of friends laugh at what he assumed was him. He regained his composure and thought to himself, one day I'll prove to him that I can be a hero too. Izuku once considered Katsuki his friend, a time when both admired the one true hero, All Might, who would save the day without raising a finger. After everyone's quirks developed in childhood and Izuku was left behind, their relationship changed for the worst. Gradually it went from name-calling, to segregation, and finally physical abuse. Izuku was a timid boy and was afraid of losing the one friend he ever had. But as time passed, he wished that he would be left alone. The sun continued to rise, gradually hitting Izuku's face. As he made it into the building, he heard the school bell ring. Izuku's eyes rose up, as he realized that he was late for class. In the classroom, the teacher stood up beside the chalkboard with an attendance sheet. Okay kids, before. Teacher, we're not 5 years old, interrupted one of the students. He put his feet on the table, challenging the teacher to make a move. Another student was about to speak up before a large thud was made from the classroom door. Everyone turned their heads to see the commotion and saw a panting Izuku that looked like as if he ran an entire marathon. You're late, Midoriya, not the best way to start your third year, said the teacher, noting down his tardiness. I'm sorry teacher, I didn't mean to, Izuku said while facing down in order to avoid all the glances his classmates gave him. The teacher looked at Izuku with disapproval and then faced towards the class. There's only one seat left, sit down so we can start class. Izuku quickly nodded and awkwardly shuffled his way in between the desks. He put down his bag and sat down, hoping to be spared of the embarrassment. Apart from him being quirkless, he's also negligent about school. How useless is he? Whispered one of the students, just loud enough for Izuku to hear. Izuku suddenly felt a small impact from the back of his chair. He looked back and saw Katsuki gesture towards him. Izuku swallowed through his throat and wished he would die. Guess we're having fun all year long, Deku, said Katsuki with a grin. That's enough talking, all of you. We're already behind schedule, announced the teacher. Now since it's the first day of class, I'll forgive your behavior, but remember that this year you will be applying for the high school of your choice. Some of the students cheered. I know that most of you want to become heroes, and some have even proclaimed that they will be applying for UA Academy. The teacher looked towards Katsuki and gave him a small nod. However, there are also those that need to set realistic goals and not apply to UA. Izuku froze. In the summer he was sent a paper from the school asking him what his future plans were. But he did not assume that the teacher would make it public. He slowly looked around the class and noticed that everyone was looking at him again. Before he could speak up, the entire class erupted in laughter. Midoriya become a hero? Asked one girl to his left. She covered her face with pity. He's a quirkless nobody, and he wants to get into UA, said another student. The teacher let the class laugh for a few more seconds, after which he demanded silence. A tiny smirk was still seen from his face. Izuku felt defeated, his legs shook, and tears slowly formed up in his eyes. He gripped his hands and he felt the death stares that Katsuki was giving him. He knew that he wasn't getting off lightly after school. Afternoon had long passed with the final class bells ringing. Izuku quickly rose up from his chair and made a sprint from the classroom. As he exited the back of the school, he could hear Katsuki shouting behind him. "Get back here, Deku, you quirkless little shit." Izuku was terrified, with his only option being to run as fast as his legs could take him. He set his sights at the school exit and made a sharp turn, barely dodging Katsuki that used his explosion quirk to speed himself up. Wait, Kachan, please think about what you are doing," yelled Izuku. Katsuki ignored his pleas. "I don't give a shit, and I'm going to break your nose for calling me that." Izuku continued to run for his life, but his body could not keep up any longer. He turned his head to look at the distance between them, only to see Katsuki land a kick on his face. The blow caused Izuku to tumble several feet before hitting a concrete wall in a park playground. Izuku's vision was blurry from the blood dripping down his forehead. He began to breathe heavily and felt a sharp pain in his chest. His voice left him, unable to scream for help as he could see Katsuki gradually approach him. "Goddamn bastard, thinking you'd get away from me," Katsuki said with an annoyed look. "There's no one around here to save you, Deku, and I swear I'll make it painful." He cracked his knuckles while facing down towards Izuku. "Stop. Kachan, I'm sorry," cried out Izuku. He wanted it to be over. He could no longer tolerate the pain and misery he had to face every day. Katsuki swung a large kick into Izuku's stomach. "Huh?" he asked. "I thought I told you already not to call me that." Izuku gasped for air. He grabbed his stomach in pain and his head fell onto the ground. Katsuki knelt and grabbed Izuku's green hair, slowly bringing up his face to his own. "You want to get into UA?" he asked with a serious tone. "I thought I made it clear that I will be the first and only person from this school to get in there. Are you trying to make fun of me?" Izuku felt cold. Shivering in fear, he was not able to answer him. Izuku's face had swelled up from the initial kick Katsuki gave him. He could no longer feel his body move, yet everything hurt. "Answer me. Are you stupid?" Katsuki shouted. He looked at his former friend and removed his grip. Katsuki turned to his left and saw a notebook protruding out of Izuku's backpack. For a moment he felt that he went too far until he saw its title. He grabbed the book and scanned through the first few pages. "What the hell is this?" Katsuki said. "You must be kidding me." Izuku barely understood what Katsuki meant. He was not able to see or hear properly. He attempted to get up, but his arms failed to move. No matter how hard he tried, his strength failed him. "I really am useless, aren't I?" Izuku thought. "Just because I have no quirk." Hero analysis for the future, Katsuki read. "You think a quirkless reject like you can compete with anyone?" Izuku remained on the ground. He was afraid that he would die. "Wake up, Deku, it's no time to be asleep," said Katsuki. He picked up Izuku once more and began to lightly tap his face. Izuku woke up from his daze and screamed at the sight of Katsuki. He crawled back up against the wall where he was first thrown at. "Geez," said Katsuki as he cleared his ear with his finger. "Finally back to your senses." Izuku saw Katsuki get closer from the corner of his eye. The day had grown darker with the sun slowly moving down. He could hear once again the branches that stirred gently in the wind, scratching at one another. Izuku opened his mouth to plead with Katsuki one last time, and the words seemed to freeze in his throat. He looked at the notebook that Katsuki held, the one and only medium for where he felt he could express his ideas and love for the hero world. Katsuki noticed Izuku's sight and a large grin formed on his face. "That gives me a great idea, Deku." Katsuki pointed to the notebook. "For a quirkless piece of shit like you, this thing is useless. Give it back," Izuku shouted, finally being able to speak. He attempted to grab it but Katsuki was quicker on the draw. "You wish," said Katsuki. He stood up and placed the notebook between his hands. "Rather, I think it deserves something better." Izuku's eyes widened in horror as he witnessed Katsuki explode it. Small pieces of burnt paper fell to the ground, leaving almost nothing recognizable. "There. Much better," Katsuki said. He stomped on the remaining pieces that were still burning. Izuku could no longer hold it in. The anger that dwelled inside him had risen to the point where it overtook all of his emotions. He yelled and attempted to swing at Katsuki several times with his fist, missing completely. "That's the spirit, but who said you can hit me?" Katsuki asked mockingly. Before Izuku could respond, Katsuki placed his hand over his face and caused a small explosion. "Just a little goodbye present for you," Katsuki sneered as he lifted his hand. The blast caused Izuku to lose consciousness. His lifeless body lay on the ground. Izuku began to hear a deafening sound that grew louder and louder. "Where am I?" he thought. His vision was black, and as time passed, he slowly began to see again. The sound he heard earlier was rain pouring down on him as he lay in the playground. He looked at the cloud-filled sky. He wasn't sure if the tears that passed down his cheeks were from him. Why even bother trying to become a hero? Izuku asked to himself as he clutched his chest. What did I do to deserve this? Izuku tried to stand up several times, hitting the wet muddy ground. Work legs, damn it work! Izuku shouted in grief. He punched his legs several times before giving up and shifting his head downward. His belongings lay beside him, destroyed either from Katsuki or the rain. Izuku began to laugh slightly, placing his hands on his face. The mix of emotions confused him. It reminded him of the time when he first learned as a kid that he would never get a quirk. Seconds passed as Izuku calmed down. He pulled away from his hands and noticed that there was blood. He quickly reached over to his backpack and removed a cloth to dry his face. He attempted once again to stand up, this time successful. I got to get back home. Mom must be worried sick by now, muttered Izuku underneath his breath. His knees shook as he bent down to grab his bag. Izuku completely ignored how beat up he was. What time is it? Izuku looked over at his watch with slanted eyes. It read 10:37 p.m. Mom is definitely going to kill me, Izuku thought. How am I going to explain this? Izuku stumbled across the playground. He made his way across the street hoping no one would see him in his state. He grabbed the wall across him, making sure that he did not fall again. His head was still dizzy from earlier. He felt as if time slowed down drastically. What do we have here? Asked a voice. People like you shouldn't be walking outside at this time. Izuku turned to the direction of the voice but was unable to discern who it was. A little on the slow side. The figure stepped towards Izuku. Well, that doesn't matter to me. Anyways. Izuku looked up once more. The figure was indiscernible, and he could not make out its features. Before he could ask any questions, the shadow was gone. Izuku jumped out of fear until a hand appeared on his shoulder. What's wrong, young man? You shouldn't be walking around this late at night, said a familiar voice. I know, Izuku said. He stood up carefully while still in shock from what happened. Are you injured? Are you okay? Asked the man. Yeah, I tripped earlier and hit my face pretty hard, Izuku lied as he turned around. In front of him stood the man he admired since as early as he could remember, All Might, the hero of heroes. Izuku's mouth opened wide and the fan inside of him took over. Oh my god, All Might, is that really you? Holy, it's a pleasure to meet you, Izuku said while shaking his hands up and down. All Might looked flustered. Oh, you are a fan of me? He asked. Holy cow, yes. I watched all of your specials and got all the special edition mini figurines, Izuku exclaimed with excitement. He never expected All Might to show up out of nowhere, and at the time when he needed him the most. Well, it's great to hear that you are okay, young man, All Might said. In that case I must head off, patrolling the streets and all that. Make sure to get home quickly. Before he could take off, he was interrupted by an unexpected shout. All Might, Izuku faced towards him. He knew he would never get to ask if he didn't do it now. Even if I don't have a quirk, can I become a hero? His feet trembled with nervousness. Can even someone without a quirk be like you? All Might looked at the boy. Heroes are always risking their lives for others. I cannot simply say that you can become a hero even without a quirk. I see. Izuku stared at All Might. He could barely let out a voice. If you want to help others, then you could become a police officer, All Might said calmly. Regardless of how others view them, it's still a respectable occupation. It's not bad to dream, but you also have to consider what is realistic. All Might leapt into the air, leaving him alone in the street. Izuku continued to face the direction his hero stood a few moments ago. Unable to understand the conversation he had, Izuku faced back and walked home slowly. In the Midoriya household, the main entrance creaked open. Inko Midoriya rushed over and greeted her son. It's almost midnight, I've been worried sick, Inko said. She followed her disoriented son through the hallway. Where have you been, Izuku, and what are these bruises? I kind of fell down when I was walking home and some elderly couple insisted I go to the hospital, Izuku said while shifting his eyes away from his mother. Inko was worried he was lying to run away from his problems, but she was glad to see him safe. Then why did the hospital not call me? Izuku stared at the floor. They said it wasn't anything serious, so they let me go after doing some checkups. Well, alright then, but make sure to be careful, Izuku. You know I love you, so talk to me if anything is on your mind. Inko said with a warm look. I see your backpack got ruined from the weather, I'll go ahead and wash it for you. Go get some rest. Sure thing, Mom. Night, Izuku said. Izuku closed the door to his room and sat on his bed. His body hurt and it was difficult for him to move even then. He looked at all the All Might merchandise that was spread across his room. It finally dawned upon him what he went through that day. Why do I exist? Izuku asked himself. No one believes in me, not my mom, not Kachan, and not even All M. Izuku broke down. He couldn't stop the tears streaming down his face as he collapsed and started crying hysterically. Izuku opened his eyes. The morning sun rays had pierced through the window in the room, crossing his face. Izuku turned to the left, blocking the sun with his back. He had cried all night from what transpired the day before, scared to relive those memories again. Izuku stayed motionless, staring at the wall in front of him. A large poster of All Might towered over, presenting the hero in all his glory. In the past Izuku would squeal from excitement every time he saw it, but now it reminded him of the face that told him his dream was not achievable. Izuku raised his arm to remove the poster. Before he could do it, he was interrupted by a knock on his door. "Izuku dear, it's time to get ready for school," Inko said through the door. "I've made your favorite dish, so don't take too long or it'll get cold." In his room, Izuku did not move. He lowered his right arm, as he looked at the poster with a blank stare. "Izuku, is everything all right?" He exited his trance, realizing his mother called for him. "Yeah, I'm coming," Izuku responded with a dejected voice. Inko stood by the door, not certain what to do. She wanted to comfort him. Over time their once happy relationship degraded into isolation from one another. Even then, she could not stand by him when he needed her the most. Inko looked at the door for a few more seconds, before deciding to go back into the living room. The light had begun to cover Izuku's room. He stood up from his bed and closed the window blinds. His body was still sore from the beatings Katsuki gave him. Izuku walked over to his mirror, to see large bags under his eyes. He was not able to sleep the entire night. Izuku moved towards his door and opened it slowly. The school bag that his mother washed lay still on the hardwood floor. Izuku picked it up and headed towards the front door. "Wait Izuku, I thought you were going to have breakfast," Inko said. Izuku continued putting on his shoes. "I'm not hungry Mom, I'll just get something at school later," Izuku replied. Before Inko could respond back, he closed the door and left. The wind had pushed cherry blossom petals around the school, covering the ground with a pleasant color. By the school gates, Katsuki and his friends stood by waiting. Izuku continued walking forward, disregarding the obvious trap that had been set up. "Hey Deku," Katsuki said irritatingly. "Where do you think you're going?" Izuku kept walking. He faced the school not realizing Katsuki was addressing him. "You really messed him up didn't you huh?" asked one boy in his group. "Or is he just not afraid of you anymore?" Katsuki flashed in anger and raised his fist. "Listen to me when I am talking to you quirkless nobody," he shouted, moving forward and landing a punch in the back of Izuku's head. The punch was strong enough to make Izuku fall. He lay on the hard-covered dirt, before slowly getting up and continuing to walk ahead, unfazed from what happened. Katsuki looked at Izuku, bewildered from what he had just witnessed. This only angered him more. "That goddamn Deku thinks he's better than me," Katsuki challenged. He let out some small explosions from his palms before he was stopped by one of his friends. "Hey Katsuki, be careful, one of the teachers might see us," he said. "Just get him later when no one else is around." Katsuki continued to stare at Izuku. He deactivated his quirk and scoffed at what transpired. "I'll meet you guys up ahead in class, I've got to tell him something." His voice was hoarse with unwarranted fury. "He deserves what's coming for him." Katsuki walked over to the boy he had just hit. He placed his arm around Izuku's shoulder and leaned over. "When lunch break hits, meet me outside class," Katsuki said. "And don't you dare and try to run away from me." Katsuki let go of his grip, tapping his hand against Izuku's head as he headed towards class. Katsuki's friends from earlier ran past Izuku, also hitting his head one by one. While Izuku had been walking, his mind strafed all over the place. He did not care about where he was, and who did what to him. His dreams of becoming a hero were shattered, and the boy that bullied him would get everything he ever wanted. Izuku entered the classroom, passing through the back and sitting down on his chair. He looked at the window. A glass building was seen in the distance with a large logo displaying UA. "Look, guys, he's staring at UA again," pointed out a classmate that was standing beside Izuku. Everyone laughed, with a few students that threw slander at him. Quirkless freak was an insult Izuku heard often. A day ago, he would have been crying over it, but now he paid no attention to them. His mind would not listen, even if he wanted to. The classroom door closed as the homeroom teacher entered. The entire room quieted down, and the students went to their seats. The school bells rang immediately after. "Midoriya. Hello Midoriya." Izuku looked up and saw the teacher facing him, waving his hand across his face. "It's already lunchtime, go get something to eat," he said. Izuku stood up casually and turned towards the door. "Oh, and Midoriya, if I catch you staring at ponies in the sky again during class, I'll give you detention." Izuku nodded and closed the door behind him. To his surprise, Katsuki was slanted against the wall with his arms crossed, tapping his fingers furiously. "It took you long enough, Deku. Are you fucking deaf or something?" Katsuki asked. "I was going to beat your ass after the teacher left, but you got lucky." Izuku looked at Katsuki. He wondered what his bully would do to him next. "Perhaps he'll break my arm this time, or I don't know, something else," Izuku wondered to himself. Thoughts that would have scared him to death seemed to go through his mind nonchalantly. "Did you forget what I told you this morning?" Katsuki asked with an annoyed look. Izuku did not answer. Katsuki looked at him again. The way Izuku acted with disinterest pissed him off beyond measure. Katsuki bit his lip and pointed to the stairs leading upwards. "Follow me, Deku. We need to talk." Both walked up the stairs, with Izuku trailing behind Katsuki. Izuku did not know what Katsuki wanted, only that it was pointless to run. Katsuki took out a set of keys from his pocket as they reached the final floor. He grabbed the handle of the door and opened it with a key, revealing an open area on the school roof. A large gust of wind passed through them, which caused Izuku's hair to point up. "Go through the door," Katsuki ordered. Izuku reluctantly walked through and looked at the bright blue sky. Katsuki closed the door behind him, leaving the keys inside. "Do you know why I called you here, Deku?" Katsuki asked with a large grin. Izuku looked back down towards Katsuki. The two made eye contact with each other. "If I were to guess, it's nothing that benefits me," Izuku said. "Oh, it benefits you all right," Katsuki responded back, laughing. He pointed towards Izuku. "Perhaps I haven't made it clear to you that you're useless. You're a nobody. And I don't like the way you've been acting since this morning." "Was that everything you wanted to say?" Izuku asked, putting his hands inside his pockets. The wind caused the air to feel much colder than it was. "Is this where you go and beat me up because I'm different?" Izuku was about to say something else until Katsuki ran up towards him and kicked Izuku's side. Izuku stumbled back, catching himself by landing his arms on the concrete floor. The kick hit Izuku's ribs. The pain caused him to cough and gasp for air several times. "So what?" Katsuki asked. He walked up to the injured boy and placed his foot on top of him. Katsuki then pushed him, which caused Izuku to collapse on the ground. "Stop trying to act like a smartass, Deku. I'm quite frankly fed up with how you're acting now. Did you stop and think about how that makes me look in front of others?" Izuku groaned in pain. He clenched his side as Katsuki began to walk over to him. "I'm getting tired of this," whispered Izuku to himself. "Speak up, you quirkless fuck," Katsuki shouted. He landed another kick, this time on the head. For a moment Izuku was filled with a terrible and loud ringing noise. No matter how hard he tried to get rid of it, it came back in intervals. Izuku tried to cover his ears, but it did not help. Katsuki's eyes lit up. He finally saw Izuku react to pain as he did in the past. There we go, now that wasn't so hard, was it? Katsuki bent his knees down. He took pleasure in looking at Izuku suffer. Remember when I said us being here would benefit you, Katsuki said. I truly meant it. He picked up Izuku by the collar and faced him towards a small rail that looped around the edges of the school roof. You see that horizon? That's your way out, maybe then you'll be born with a quirk. Katsuki continued gripping Izuku tightly. Now go on then, do it. No one will care. Izuku looked at Katsuki through the top of his eyes. He once again felt despair, but his mind had left him. Izuku started thrashing in terror, speaking incoherent sentences as tears streamed down his face. Katsuki looked at him. If you're not going to do it, then I'll help you. Katsuki overpowered Izuku with physical strength alone and began moving him closer to the ledge. They'll think it's just suicide, a poor miserable kid who killed himself because he had no quirk. The wind had grown stronger and muffled any sounds that were heard from above. Katsuki continued to drag Izuku closer. He laughed to himself. Think of it as me helping you, Deku. I am only making it easier for you, Katsuki said. Don't lie to yourself, you know you want to do it. Izuku did not attempt to break free. The amount of psychological and physical stress had led him into a state of extreme madness. Suddenly, his mind went clear and a shadow appeared in front of him, sitting on the edge of the roof. It looked out towards the city. Has it finally gotten to the grand finale? The shadow contemplated. You know, I wonder sometimes how you dealt with this, but now I see that you are weak. Time had slowed down once again. Izuku looked at the shadow once more. Its features were incomplete, yet oddly resembled a human. You have a few seconds left before your fate is sealed. Once you fall off this roof, plunging to your death, people will scream in horror. But when they learn it was you, you will only become a joke, an afterthought to them. What are? Izuku paused. Are you God? Far from it, yet I am surprised you haven't recognized me, the figure answered in a flat voice. It turned around to face Izuku. I am the manifestation of your hatred, I am you. Izuku could see a faint smile. You've just kept me hidden away, ignoring that I exist. And now here I am, offering you a way to survive, the shadow said with a caring tone. Help me, Izuku pleaded without a second thought. He began to cry once more, whether it was out of fear or not. It was the first time anyone truly extended him a welcoming hand. He accepted reality. Good, I am glad you have chosen me, said the shadow. Parts of its body and face started to shape into Izuku's image. It gave off a large smile, but it did not feel warm. Katsuki picked up Izuku and placed his chest on top of the rail. He noticed Izuku's body slump forward without any resistance. Did he pass out? Katsuki thought. Katsuki felt something odd occur. Before he realized what happened, his head was grabbed and smashed across the guard rail. Katsuki stumbled back, regaining his footing. Ow! That fucking hurt! Katsuki shouted. He shook his head around to find out who did it. Who the hell was it? Show yourself. Katsuki froze when he saw Izuku standing in front of him. Who do you think it was, Kachan? Something wrong with your head now? Izuku asked, pointing his finger at his own. What the F? Katsuki said before he was interrupted. Let me finish. I've sort of grown impatient letting you speak all the time, Izuku pointed out. Katsuki could not move. Izuku's actions confused him. Is that really the Deku I know? Katsuki thought. This is hilarious, just look at your face, Izuku said with a smile. He brought his body forward, tilting his head to the side. I know what you're thinking. And yes, it's still me, but I can thank you for finally driving me to this point. It feels refreshing. Katsuki clenched his fists. Deep down there was a small part of him that was afraid. But it was still the Deku he knew that was standing in front of him. So, you finally went nuts. Katsuki taunted Izuku. Gives me a better excuse to beat the shit out of you. In the distance, the school bell rang. Katsuki put his fists up and charged towards Izuku. He swung his right arm at head level. Izuku quickly ducked. He felt Katsuki's hand pass through his hair. Izuku attempted to laugh at his attempt but was quickly hit in the stomach from a left jab. Not so tough for you now? Katsuki asked. He picked up Izuku and pushed him towards the ledge. Izuku barely managed to not fall off by hitting the guardrail. Katsuki walked towards Izuku but was instantly grabbed around his torso. The fight turned into a grappling match, with both sides hitting each other with whatever arm or leg they could use. Get off me, damn it, Katsuki said. He punched Izuku in the back several times before his legs slipped and both fell. Before Katsuki realized what happened, he looked up and saw Izuku holding his hand. His body lay swinging on the side of the school building. Izuku attempted to hold on as hard as he could. He did not know why, but his body moved on its own. Is this what you wanted, Deku? Katsuki asked with a slight crack in his voice. Tell me. Izuku ignored Katsuki. He tried his best to hold on using all the strength he had left. The commotion was seen from below, with a gym teacher and a few students seeing a student being held with one hand. Katsuki began to form tears in his eyes. He did not want to die. Deku! Katsuki cried out. Izuku tried to reassure Katsuki he would be safe, but at that moment he felt his grip slip. Izuku watched in silence as Katsuki fell. His back faced the ground as he looked into Izuku's eyes. Screams were heard across the entire school, as most classes peered out of the windows to see where the sounds were coming from earlier. All they saw was a student's body laying on the ground, lifeless. Izuku moved back from the ledge and stared blankly at what he had witnessed. He did not want Katsuki to die, but deep in his mind, he felt as if he was relieved from a pain in his heart. Izuku touched his face and felt that his lips had arched up slightly. There was no fear, no pain, no feeling of guilt, only laughter. Izuku sat in a small room still wearing his school uniform. He waited for what seemed an eternity. Izuku looked at the desk in front of him. A cup of freshly made coffee had gotten cold. The door to the room opened. All right, Midoriya. I apologize for making you wait, said the police officer. He sat down across the table from Izuku. I'm Detective Naomasa Tsukauchi. I'm leading the investigation for Bakugo's death. The detective glanced at the untouched mug. Don't like coffee? He asked. Oh no, not really, Izuku responded. He could not stand bitter drinks. Naomasa leaned back against his chair and pointed towards the door. Well, in that case, do you want me to get something else for you? Naomasa asked. We've got tea and most likely some other drinks. I'm good, thanks, Izuku said. He shifted his eyes down to the ground. Naomasa stared at him for a moment. He placed document files on the desk. I'll be frank with you, Midoriya. I'm only here to get information on what happened, and we're riding on the fact that it was an accident, Naomasa said. He opened the folder, showing a picture of Katsuki. You were the only one on the roof when Bakugo fell. Izuku stared at the picture silently. We are aware of your history with the boy. It wasn't that hard to figure out from the people who were around you daily, Naomasa said. But why were you both there? Izuku told him what transpired. He explained the details of Katsuki bullying him and leading up to the point when they went up to the roof. You're telling me that after he brought you up, it ultimately resulted in him tripping and falling off the ledge, Naomasa said. He rested a finger on his chin. Izuku nodded. Even though it was his actions at the end that led up to that moment, it was the truth. Inside his mind, Izuku laughed to himself and questioned at how it even happened. Was there anything else? Naomasa asked. He shifted through another paper, writing down information. Izuku noticed it was his chance to make the detective feel more sympathetic to him. Before he fell, he brought me up there to commit suicide. Naomasa's eyes moved up from his glasses. Interesting. If that's the case, I'm sorry you had to experience that. He attempted to see if Izuku's body movement or speaking behaviors changed. He was unsettled at how a junior high boy seemed unfazed from the events that transpired, and how normal he acted after mentioning he was almost killed. Naomasa copied Izuku's sitting position. He brought his legs closer together. With everything that happened, why do you appear so calm? Izuku took a moment to reflect on the question. He did not want to say anything that would make him suspicious. I don't know, sir. It's just that I've never really been close to him after his quirk developed. He paused. And I'm just trying to forget about what happened. Naomasa could not fault the boy. He was aware of the negative perception people with no quirks got. Let alone how children would view that and prey on those who were different. In reality, Izuku never wanted to forget the moment when Katsuki fell. He could not get enough of the face he last saw before his bully died. Izuku wanted to see it again. He did not understand why, but it felt good. Naomasa was about to ask another question before a speaker in the room interrupted him. A woman's voice spoke through. Detective Tsukauchi, the final piece of evidence you requested earlier had just arrived. You can go ahead and pick it up. Naomasa raised his forehead a little. He placed his mug down. We'll take a break for a bit. I'll be back in a few minutes, Midoriya. Sorry about that. Izuku wasn't sure what they meant by evidence, but he did not remember at any point where his actions would be seen as guilty of murder. He glanced over the room. One thing caught his attention. Izuku noticed it was the only other object in the room apart from the table. A large vase of flowers stood in a corner. It portrayed an assortment of visible colors, yet something did not belong there. Better keep my mouth shut and not say something I'll regret, Izuku thought. He was not certain if a recorder was placed there, but it was better to be safe than sorry. 30 minutes had passed, yet the detective did not return. Izuku, bored out of his mind, counted the number of visible dots he saw on the drywall ceiling. 11:32, 11:33, 11:34, Izuku counted. The door opened right before Izuku could continue. Sorry about the wait, Naomasa said. Izuku noticed that he did not bring his folder with him. The good news I can tell you is that you've been completely exonerated from any sort of suspicion. Izuku sat in disbelief. Did it really take that fast? He thought. If you're wondering why, we reviewed video footage from a security camera that was stationed up at the roof. I guess it was there for a good reason, Naomasa stated. When he reviewed the footage, Izuku's story aligned with what was shown. Along with all of the witness accounts being factored in, everything comes together, so I'm sorry for putting you through all of this, Naomasa said. He sat back down on his chair. Granted that this was proper procedure, he retorted. If you were the one responsible for his death, then it would spell out a different story. Izuku looked down. It was difficult for him to keep a straight face. Oh, I didn't mean to mention that, Naomasa laughed. He misunderstood Izuku for being scared. With that out of the way, unavoidably there is also some bad news, Midoriya. The boy looked at Naomasa, confused from what he meant. Due to the incident that occurred a few days ago, we felt as if it was in the best interest to transfer you to another school. Some of them in this region take third-year transfer students in, Naomasa said. He stopped to regain his breath. But due to the situation, they're not willing to take you in. I hope you understand. Izuku looked at the detective, twiddling his thumbs. He did not care about school anymore. The school you're in right now can't legally expel you, so there are no other real options for you, Naomasa said quietly. He stood up from his chair and gestured Izuku to do the same. The detective put one hand on Izuku's shoulder. Your mom is waiting outside. Izuku, Inko cried out. She ran towards her son and hugged him with tremendous force. Mom, you're hurting me, Izuku whispered. He attempted to get out, but she did not let go. I was so worried, I thought you were hurt, and they did not let me see you. She looked at the detective with an angry look. Naomasa put his hands up, feigning ignorance. Pretty sure that is illegal to do with a minor, Izuku thought for a second, but he was just glad to have gotten out. Did they do anything to you? Inko asked. She let go of her son, wiping her tears away. Izuku looked at her. No mom, everything's fine. The detective smiled at the sight. I don't mean to interrupt your reunion, but there's still something I need to mention, Naomasa said. He put his hands inside his coat pockets. Inko and Izuku faced towards him. We've done our best to keep the details surrounding this tragedy away from the news outlets, Naomasa said. He passed Inko over his business card. If they start bothering you and your son, give me a call and the department will sort it out. He opened the door and left the building. Inko placed the card inside her purse as they exited the police department. She let out a sigh. Izuku, I was hoping we could visit Bakugo's family and give them some proper closure. Izuku did not like hearing that. I don't think they'd like to see me, and if anything, isn't that the police's job? Izuku murmured an excuse. Don't be like that, Inko replied in shock. Mitsuki and Masaru always liked you when you were younger, and it would be better if you explained to them what happened. Tell them that he was a good friend. Izuku's eyes lit up in anger. What about how I feel? Izuku shouted, surprising Inko. Several passers-by stopped and faced towards the outcry in the street. Do you even know who he was to me? Why should I do something like that for him? Izuku berated his mother. He clenched his fists. Have you ever stopped to consider my well-being over others for at least one day? It was the first time Inko witnessed her son act that way. His words left her stunned, and before she could respond, Izuku ran off. Izuku, wait! Inko cried out. Izuku continued to run as fast as he could. He wanted to be left alone, just anywhere but here, Izuku reasoned to himself. The sun had already begun to set. Izuku continued running aimlessly forward, confusing pedestrians as he passed them. His body grew tired, but Izuku mustered on until the point of fatigue. Izuku had lost sense of time and direction. The only thing that faced in front of him was the ocean, glimmering in a red pastel color. Seagulls flew over as they attempted to catch fish swimming in the water. "You're just overreacting," a voice said behind Izuku. "That's not who I am. That's not who we are." The embodiment of Izuku's natural desires reappeared in front of him. Only its face mirrored his look, the rest was covered in shadows once again. "Just look at you. Even after you took care of Katsuki, you're conflicted," the shadow said. "Make up your mind. You shouldn't care about how others feel about you. Mother might have made it look like she cared, but she was the first one to throw you under the bus." "She's not your mother," Izuku countered immediately. The shadow looked at Izuku with disappointment. "I thought we have already gone over this," it said. "I understand how you feel, but this is getting us nowhere." Izuku blinked, staring at the shadow. "Then what do you propose I do?" The shadow snorted. "Must I repeat everything again?" "Whatever." The shadow stopped. It spoke in a chilling tone. "Stop caring about others and also how they feel about you. First rule, and the last rule," it said. "I don't expect change immediately, but there is already some progress." "Yeah, well, that's because I was led up against a wall. I had no choice," Izuku said. "But it felt good when you did it." "I know it felt good," the shadow replied back. Izuku could not argue with it. There was some truth to that emotion. When Katsuki fell, Izuku felt relieved. "I don't plan on coming back out again," the shadow said. It looked at Izuku with dead eyes. "I'm not here for emotional support. If you intend on paying back the world that had left you to die, it's only your actions that will prove it." "You're right," Izuku responded with an expressionless face. He realized what a child he had been. In front of Izuku stood the only thing that truly understood him. Izuku looked back towards the shadow, but it was already gone. Inside the house, Inko paced back and forth, worrying about her son. She initially wanted to head back to the police office and have them find Izuku, but she soon realized they would not do anything if he had been missing for 1 hour. "I just hope he's okay," she thought to herself. "Maybe I did push him too far." She grabbed the house phone, dialing 911. She looked at the screen displaying the number before canceling it and placing it back down on the stand. Inko did not know what to do. The front door's handle suddenly moved. The door opened, revealing Izuku standing beside it. "Izuku, you're back?" Inko asked, still not believing what she had seen. Izuku nodded. He entered inside and closed the door. "Just had to take a breather. I am fine now," Izuku said. "Look, dear, I'm sorry about earlier," Inko admitted. "I didn't consider your thoughts about it." "It's fine," Izuku responded. He took off his shoes and walked past Inko into the hallway. Maybe his mother cared for him, he thought, but it was too late. Inko turned to face Izuku. "If you're hungry, I can make some dinner." Izuku waved back. "Sure, I'll be in my room. Call me when it's ready," he said with a flat voice. Inko was not sure how to respond to what she had witnessed. She did not know whether to be happy that her son came back or feel frightened by the way he acted. Izuku closed his door and removed his school vest, following up with his dress shirt. He walked up to the mirror and looked at himself. From across the shoulders to his hips, his body was covered in scars and burns that he had accumulated from injuries Katsuki had given him since childhood. It did not bother Izuku anymore. He intended on wearing it like armor. A reminder to himself of who he was, and what had been done to him. Izuku chuckled when he remembered how hard he always tried to hide it from his mother. Even now he was certain she did not know. He looked at the desk in front of him. A large pile of notebooks he had written down lay untouched. Regardless of what its intentions were, I guess it could still prove useful to me, Izuku said to himself. He opened the notebook at the top and looked through its contents. Top hero quirks and how they can be improved, he read. Izuku flipped to the next page and saw a drawing of All Might. Quirk. Super strength and awesomeness. How to improve it? Izuku stared at the page before he let out a small laugh. Even though All Might told him he could not be a hero, Izuku respected his sense of duty and actual effort into saving others instead of himself. I guess I am going to have to do more research, Izuku said. He closed the notebook and walked up to the closet, grabbing a long-sleeve shirt and putting it on. There is still a lot of more interesting quirks for me to learn about, Izuku thought, before sitting down on his bed. He was not certain of how he would enact revenge against the society that wronged him. Izuku pondered for a while, he then came to a short-term solution. Izuku rested his chin on his hand. All I have is information about hero quirks and some villains, but I need more if I want to get somewhere with this. Izuku did not know where to start, yet it did not matter to him. Just the thought alone of him doing something terrible made his heart tremble with excitement. He had not felt that way since Katsuki's death. Izuku, dinner is ready, Inko yelled, loud enough for him to hear. Izuku stood up and left his room. He walked over to the dinner table and sat down. Inko shifted over with 2 plates and placed one beside him. She noticed that Izuku acted happier than how he was earlier. Well, someone looks better now, Inko said joyfully. Just make sure school doesn't bring you down. Oh, it won't, Izuku said immediately. Inko was surprised once more. She could not tell what her son was thinking. He seemed like a completely different person. Izuku took a bite out of his fish. I'll be home later tomorrow. Oh, why's that? Inko asked with curiosity. I'm planning on doing some research for an assignment that's coming up, Izuku replied, grinning towards his mother. Izuku stood outside of his apartment. The morning breeze had set in, pushing small scraps of paper beneath his feet. Izuku rubbed his eyes. He had trouble sleeping the night before. Initially, it was from his excitement, but whenever he tried to close his eyes after, his body would not go to sleep. Izuku walked down the building stairs. If I'm going to do this, I'll need to find an opportunity where I get to meet a villain in private, Izuku thought. He knew his plan was reliant mostly on luck. Finding someone trustworthy was going to be difficult. School comes first though for now, Izuku muttered. He held a brand new notebook in his hands. The atmosphere changed at the junior high school ever since the incident. Katsuki was beloved by everyone due to his exceptional talents. They were sad to have him gone. All of the students stopped and whispered when they saw Izuku, keeping their distance from him. Izuku was annoyed at how much attention he received. A group of first years stared at him, to which they only saw eyes of pure hatred, which seemed to penetrate into their souls. They quickly ran off, passing by him. Izuku walked over to his classroom. His classmates quieted down immediately. He sat down once again at the chair he was given at the start of the year. This time no one was going to kick him in the back. One of the students finally made the courage to speak up against Izuku. It should have been you, the student said in grief. Why is it you that had to be here? Izuku turned to face his classmate. He smiled. That was very nice of you to say, Izuku remarked sarcastically. Glad to see you being ignorant as ever. What did you say? The boy asked. He walked over to Izuku, grabbing his collar. Now you're resorting to violence. Izuku asked with a bored expression. How heroic of you. They stood there in silence until the teacher slapped them both on the head. Enough with the fighting, both of you. I don't want to see that again, the teacher said. The boy turned to his desk. Bye-bye, Izuku said quietly. He waved his hand. What's wrong with him? Asked one student behind Izuku. Pay no attention, he's just trying to mess with us, said another. He should have ended up in prison. Izuku ignored them. They were all insignificant to him. Midoriya, the teacher walked up to him after the last class ended. Don't provoke them right now, it's a tough time for most of them. Izuku looked at the teacher with perplexity. He had to clear his ears in order to make sure he heard what he thought he did. Whatever you say, teacher, Izuku responded back. He left the building, heading towards the downtown area. Is this what I'm really dealing with on a minor scale? Izuku thought. It's already gotten this bad. How many more people are going to be thrown away to rot? Izuku moved his backpack towards him. He opened the top and took out a pencil and notebook that he had brought with him. Time to look around, Izuku said gleefully. I wonder what quirks I'll learn about today. His habit of analyzing information was the last trait Izuku had kept unchanged. It did not take him long to find an alleyway with the sound of people brawling. Lucky, Izuku said. He put his hands together. Quietly Izuku walked closer to the fight that had taken place. He noticed that there were mostly thugs, but one of the aggressors stood out. Show me your blood, the towering figure screamed. He picked up one thug by the head, the lifeless body lifted away from the ground. Before Izuku could examine the quirk, the thug's head exploded from the tremendous amount of force exerted on it. A small amount of blood sprayed onto Izuku's notebook, yet his eyes lit up with excitement from what he had witnessed. What was that? Izuku thought. He only saw for a brief moment when the man's hand grew in size. Did he just alter his physical strength? Izuku was lost in a million discussions that his mind went through. His habit of muttering long sentences began to spill out. Izuku instinctively started writing down observations and theories of the quirk the man used to commit murder with. Blonde hair. Around 2 meters tall and, Izuku was interrupted by a body flying past his face. He initially thought he had been seen, but the blonde man continued fighting the remaining gang members. Izuku looked at the headless body that rested beside his feet. It was a shame, he thought. He would never learn its quirk. Is that all that you've got, weaklings? The murderer asked. I was told it would be worth my time fighting you. The man opened up his arms, inviting them to hit him. I'll give you one chance. You can hit me, and I won't block it with my arms. The thugs hesitated. One of them then quickly rushed forward, sticking out a combat knife towards the man's chest. Izuku could not see well from the man's back. Yet he noticed that he stood unworried. The murderer chuckled to himself before grabbing the thug by his hand, smashing him against the wall. Izuku finally saw what the unknown man's quirk manifested into. Muscle fibers surrounded his arm and chest, the knife still protruded out of it. The man took out the blade, throwing it down on the ground. Didn't say I wasn't going to use my quirk, the man cracked up. He reverted back to his regular form. Screw that, I don't want to die here, said one of the thugs, running off. The rest who were alive followed suit. The blonde man scoffed, weaklings. He was about to exit the alleyway before a quiet sound behind him caught his attention. The man turned around. He noticed something prodding a thug he killed earlier with what looked like a pencil. What the hell, the man thought before slowly walking up towards the site. It took him by surprise when he saw a teen in his school uniform looking at the body with a curious expression. The boy mumbled to himself, occasionally writing down something in his notebook. The man interrupted him, "Shouldn't you be in school, little boy?" It confused him as to how the kid in front of him remained calm from his presence, let alone the fact that a dead body was laying in front of him. Izuku looked up towards the man, realizing that he had been found out. He stopped writing in his notebook. "Classes already ended," Izuku responded back. "Can you give me just a second to finish this up?" The man continued to stare at the boy. He was puzzled from what he heard. "Who are you affiliated with?" he asked, looking at the bloodied notebook. He felt a weird vibe from the boy, it gave off mixed signals. "I'm just someone who is interested in quirks," Izuku responded. He closed his notebook. "That doesn't answer my question," the man said. He tensed up his arms for a possible confrontation. Izuku stood up, bringing his body up to face the man. "It's just me, but," he stopped. "The more I look at you, it reminds me of a villain I have read about." Before the man could respond, Izuku raised his voice. "Ah, I remember your quirk, you're muscular, aren't you?" Izuku asked with interest. "That's right," Muscular replied. He was impressed that someone recognized him. Izuku changed his tone, he looked happy. "Your quirk is amazing. It's like so strong, powerful enough to pretty much overtake anyone." Thanks. I guess," Muscular said, not knowing what else to say. His day was just getting weirder and weirder. What kind of other things can you do? How long can you use it for? Are there any side effects? What made you decide to go down the villain path? Izuku rambled on. He spoke almost without taking a breather. "Jesus kid, calm down, will you?" Muscular asked. He rested one hand on his head, shaking the back of his hair slightly. The boy piqued his interest. "Why isn't he scared of me? Shouldn't he be afraid that I'll kill him?" Muscular thought. "Oh, sorry," Izuku said, shifting his head down. "Don't be," Muscular said reassuringly. "Say, you didn't happen to have anyone know or follow you on the way here?" Izuku thought for a second. He looked at the alleyway entrance he came through earlier. "No, I don't think so." Muscular let out a grin. "Good." He raised his hand, forming a punching stance towards the boy. Muscular flung his fist towards Izuku. The blow created enough force to dent the building wall. Cracks formed around the stone. Izuku looked to his left. The fist had barely scratched him. He felt a sharp pain on his cheek. Blood dripped slowly to the ground. "Not bad," Muscular said. "I don't sense any fear in you. However, I suggest you forget what you saw here earlier, for both of our sakes." He looked at the notebook that Izuku had held from the beginning. "I'll be taking that." "Huh?" Izuku asked. He then realized what had happened, attempting to grab it back. "But you can't. It's mine." "What did you say?" Muscular asked. He glanced at Izuku with rage, stopping the boy from complaining. Muscular then folded the notebook and placed it in his back pocket. Izuku looked at the bent notebook protruding out. He drifted his eyes with a disappointed look, knowing it would be best not to provoke the man who killed others with relative ease. "You should be glad I'm letting you live. I would have killed you if you attempted to run away," Muscular said. The alleyway had begun to reek of blood. He had already wasted too much time talking. "You're a bit on the weird side, but I like you." Muscular stepped back. He created a large set of muscles around his legs. "What's your name, kid?" "Izuku. Izuku Midoriya," he said without thinking. "Hey, Didn't your parents ever tell you to never give out your name to strangers? Muscular asked. He shook his head in disbelief. Well, Izuku staggered. Muscular jumped into the air, passing over the building in front of him. Izuku fell from the knockback. He got back on his feet after a few seconds, scraping the dirt off his shoulder. Holy shit, Izuku said. The jump startled him. He naturally moved his hand around to find his notebook, upon which he realized he no longer had any more. He opened his school bag, taking out another one. Izuku wrote down everything he could remember. As he finished, Izuku wiped his forehead. He was surprised to feel sweat. Time to head out before anyone realizes I was here, Izuku muttered. He heard police sirens in the distance as he left the street. Inside a small lounge, a man sat by the counter waiting for the bartender to finish his drink. The door slammed open. Muscular entered through with an annoyed look. Jiren, the place you sent me to had a bunch of nobodies there, Muscular said. It was a complete waste of my time. Jiren took out a burning cigarette from his mouth, butting the end of it inside a receptacle. He exhaled a large puff of smoke to the side. Don't be like that. Their boss had some intel on the existence of our organization, Jiren said with a calm look. I take it you destroyed the files in his safe. Muscular walked over to the bar counter and sat parallel to Jiren from across two seats. He waved off to the bartender, who had his face and arms covered in black mist. I'll get an IPA, tap of your choice. The bartender nodded. He handed over Jiren the drink he made earlier. Yeah, they're gone. It's the last we should hear of them either, Muscular responded. Jiren grabbed his drink and took a sip. Good. Small or not in scale, right now the boss is intending on playing his cards right, Jiren said, looking at the glass. He put the cigarette back between his teeth. Muscular shrugged. As long as I get to kill someone, I guess it's tolerable. Speaking of waiting until the time is right, the bartender asked. Did we hear anything about looking for more potential villains to join our cause? Jiren exhaled and looked at the bartender. Well, I have been looking Kurogiri, but so far it's a mixed bag. Kurogiri placed a glass under the tap, pouring beer into it. What do you mean it's a mixed bag? He questioned. Well, for starters I already found some that pass the criteria. But the number is small, and only a few I still have to get background checks on, Jiren noted. That doesn't sound too bad, Kurogiri stated, closing the tap. Jiren took out his cigarette once more. He waved it around in his hand. I have already searched extensively in the entire applicant pool. And it's not necessarily increasing too. That's why we exist, stated Tamura Shigaraki behind them. Muscular turned around and saw a young man with light blue hair. Great, Muscular thought to himself. Another kid I have to deal with today. His eyes slowly opened. Hey Jiren, I actually came in for another reason today. He grabbed the glass of beer Kurogiri handed him. Does the name Izuku Midoriya ring any bells? Jiren thought for a second. No, it doesn't. Why do you ask? Muscular reached for his back pocket, grabbing the notebook he took earlier. Met him there when I was killing off the rest of the group. I think you might be interested in seeing this. Muscular said. He put the notebook on the table and slid it over to him. What's this? Jiren asked. The notebook he looked at had no title. I grabbed this off him when I talked to him. I don't know who he is, but he was an interesting fellow, Muscular said, gulping down the last ounce of his drink. Take a look. Jiren opened the notebook, revealing detailed information on Muscular's quirk. Several pages explained the quirk's weaknesses, abilities, and ways on how to improve it. What's scary about this is that it's all true. He wrote all of that after seeing me use my quirk maybe 2 or 3 times, Muscular said seriously. Jiren was surprised. There were a few things in the notebook even he did not know about. Interesting indeed, Jiren noted. He placed the cigarette inside the bowl. Is this something that has to do with his quirk? Muscular asked Kurogiri for another glass. Not certain. I don't even know if that boy is a villain. The entire group was taken aback. I'm surprised you even let someone live. Nevertheless, the fact that it was a child, Kurogiri said. Muscular dismissed his comment. That's not the point. He's probably 13 or 14, but I think he's good enough to join the league. Can't speak for his fighting skills though. Jiren sighed audibly. I can't deny what you've shown me. I hate to say it, but his talent exceeds my own when it comes to quirk analysis, he agreed with Muscular. Tamura attempted to grab the notebook but was stopped by Jiren. That's up for Muscular to decide. If he wants you to see, then he'll give it to you. Tamura walked away, clawing his fingers at his throat with frustration. Jiren walked up and passed the notebook over to Muscular. Apart from this wonderful news, you've actually decided to visit at a perfect time. The boss is here, Jiren pointed out. The entire group was surprised once again. There was no news of his arrival. Clapping was heard in a dark hallway behind them. As expected of you, Jiren, you never fail to entertain me with your antics. You flatter me, sir, but I'm just an old man with connections, Jiren replied with respect. I heard the conversation you had. I am curious in the boy as well. He may prove useful to us, the voice pointed out. A man wearing a suit appeared out of the door. A large mask covered his entire head and neck area. Indeed, all for one it is as you say, Jiren said. However, I am not certain how to approach this scenario. We know nothing about him. There is no need to worry about that. I will personally assess him myself, all for one stated. Tamura had been watching from the sidelines. He did not like the interest his master took towards the boy. All for one looked at the group gathered at the bar. That covers it then. Good work all of you. The preparations are coming along nicely. The mask covered his smile. Jiren nodded. Would you like me to inform the non-present members of anything? That won't be necessary, all for one said. He put his hand up. Focus on the recruits. And Tamura, the mask turned to face him. I will need to speak with you soon.